Welcome to 101 Ways of Being, the podcast that is all about how we discover our own ways of being. My name is Schroeder, and I am a writer and performing artist that started this thing as a way to capture the ways we come together through creativity. What does it mean to find our own ways of being, and how does that tie in with the communities that we are a part of? This is the eighth episode, blah. I am really excited that this thing is still going. I just got back from a trip to Colorado, which was really transformative in some different ways, which I'll get into more later. But to start, I'd like to share some updates. The first one being, finally launched my Patreon for this show. If you've been looking for a way to support this show, there is 2 different tiers. The first one is pay what you can. Anything helps. Kind of the lowest amount being, or I guess the highest amount for this tier would be $3. That's what it says on the thing. But if you can only do $1, that's totally cool too. And joining this one makes you an official patron of 101 Ways of Being, gives you access to our private community chat on Discord, and also access to our monthly workshops, which I will explain more in a minute. You'll see. I'm excited to share that, but I just want to explain more about the patron first. But the first tier also just helps me support the show, basically. Then the next tier is $5 or more. And this gives you access to the same things as the first tier, as well as extended interviews and behind the scenes content, stuff that just doesn't really make it onto the official videos, but still, why not share if you want to know a little bit more about me and what goes into creating this show and the people that I bring on this show. That's a way to get access to that. And then you also, when you join this all-access patron tier, you get a sticker and a magnet. I'd send that to you as soon as you subscribe. And you also have the chance to be a guest or suggest a guest to be on this show. So once a month, I'll do a random drawing of the current patrons in this tier. And then I'll reach out to you if you are the person that is chosen. And I'm really just doing this as a way because I want you guys to be involved with this just as much as the guests that I have on this show. You know, I don't want this to be an exclusive thing where the listeners never have a chance of being on the show. I want it to be interactive, and that's why this community is so important to me as well. I want, the private chat to be a safe space for people to come and talk about the show, talk about maybe something they've reflected on after listening to an episode, which leads me to the workshops, which I'm really excited to start leading. So right now, my idea is to do once a month. We'll start as a virtual live stream that you can tune into. And basically, it will be a time for you to reflect. It'll give you a little bit of time to have some quiet time. I'll give you some questions for you to reflect on, and it will often tie in with the most recent episode. So a way to sort of connect those things and create more discussion from these episodes. And then we'll kind of see where that goes. And as always, I love feedback on these things. And if you have any ideas for helping me bring this idea further, we're going to kind of see where it goes. But the whole point is to create a safe space for reflection and discussion and connecting with others. We'll see. So yeah, if you want to join the Patreon, the link for that community will be in the episode description. Today, something that I'd like to chat about is sort of how do we step out of the patterns that we've grown to know and love, and perhaps integrate the messages that have appear between the lines. Now, what I mean by that is, sometimes, just like this past trip I went on, I was at a hoop retreat where I went to workshops, and there was a lot of vulnerability and connections, and there's a lot to take away from this trip. But when I got home, I felt, just tired, and there was all these things that I had learned from the retreat, but then I was just like, oh man, but I still just don't feel ready to really step into perhaps the power that I felt like I had garnered during this trip. And, but one thing that one of the retreat organizers had mentioned was, saying something about allowing what we learned to integrate. And that really got me thinking. I think, when we do learn something new, sometimes we might expect like, okay, patterns changed right away. I'm going to start incorporating what I learned right away. And I think it actually takes a bit of time for things to integrate within the body, whether that's, physiologically when you are starting to maybe drink a lot more water, or, I don't know if that's just a random example that just popped in my head, but, like your body, your emotional body, your spiritual body, perhaps, things need time to integrate. Just like at the end of a yoga class, when you go into Savasana, you're laying on the ground, and it's like it's letting the benefits from the practice settle into your body. And I think it's just the same for when we experience something transformative, or when we're trying to change a habit, or maybe we're starting a new job and it's really overwhelming at first. Things take time, and we have to allow ourselves the time and space to settle in. And I've kind of started to think about it as a 3-step process in a way. You can kind of sort of break it down into these 3 steps, I guess you could call it. I think that these things sort of can happen at the same time as well. But, there's the learning something new, or taking in some new knowledge, info, insight. And then there's the integration period. It's settling into the idea of something new, adjusting physiologically, emotionally, spiritually, right? Like I just said. And then it's like you have this, now you have this ability to rise up, or you have the chance to. You have this opportunity to step back out into the world and into the roles that serve the highest good for you and your community. This can also be moving on from relationships that maybe didn't serve us, or maybe they grew to be toxic. I know not everyone likes using that word, but sometimes it's like it's so hard right away. Like, for example, like when I left my previous relationship, it was so hard, and it still is hard at times. But I feel like the first year, maybe even the first few months, were really the hardest. And it was like, because you have to get used to, it's just like an addiction. Your body has to get used to, it has to like recalibrate. And I think it's the same when, whether that's a good or bad thing, like recalibration. I don't know. I don't even know if this is gonna make sense, but when I started thinking on this topic of integration and brainstorming how I could elaborate on this topic on this show and how to make it make sense for an episode, I decided to draw a few cards from a new oracle deck that I recently received, which I will link in the description box down below. But this is what the deck looks like. This is the back cover. Don't mind my nails, I need to get them done. But the first card that I pulled was the Raven card. I don't know, okay. You think that's good? So I started to think about how do we interpret signs and messages that come into our life? Because often before we make a decision, before we learn something new, or perhaps while we're learning something new in the process, there are sometimes signs, if you believe in it or not, that can sometimes confirm or deny if we're on the right path. And I just have a thing with birds. Like, I feel like I'm just always finding feathers and feeling these connections to birds. So, but then when I looked at the description of what this card meant, it was, about the raven will bring you in and out of the darkness. And it's a messenger. It's a reminder to have faith. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. The integration period lasts our whole life. I mean, we're constantly learning new things and adapting to changes and having to let things go, make hard decisions. And we move in and out of learning and unlearning and reflecting on our experiences in a way that makes sense so we can make sense of it and make the most use of what we learned and what we were given. How do we receive what's right before us? How do we manage a headache or something that can't be controlled? Do you power through, take it easy, or dwell on the throb? I guess we have to do all of these things from time to time. So maybe a bit of all the above. So again, the raven coming in and out of the darkness. So yeah, this is a little bit of an oracle reading. If this is your introduction to that. I can do a future episode about oracle reading and tarot cards and all that stuff in the future. I'd love to have a guest on about that, but for now this is just a little bit of a dabble because it was something I felt called to do when I was preparing this episode. So yeah, the two other cards that I pulled were Faith and Fall. So Fall, I thought was really interesting that I pulled this since we are going into fall. Right now it is the end of August, mid-end August, when this episode is coming out. And I think fall is always, a reminder of different things. I mean, it's moving into any season there's a lot of different great metaphors. But as we transition into a new season, a new phase in life, as the leaves fall and temperatures cool, how can you take your experiences from the summer with you? How will you integrate what you have learned? Will you allow yourself the space to reflect? Will you settle in with a blanket and watch the colors change, admiring the tree's ability to let go? Or will you grasp onto the past, hastily, I don't know what to say, Laura, but hastily preparing for the future you cannot know yet? So how are you settling into this new season? Because, I think it's easy to be, when it's the summer, we're just like, oh man, I want cooler weather. We're looking forward a lot. But I think the transition period is just as important as when we're in the midst of these transformational moments that then we have to integrate later on. So the other card was Faith, which I love how this artist depicts faith. She is holding a flower. She cannot see, but she is surrounded by butterflies, right? So have faith. Trust the beauty. Find the balance in the duality of life. Find strength in other senses. Grow your skills to the best of your ability. Trust. So it's the blind leading the blind, really. So trust your intuition. Have faith in your guides and mentors, mentees, whoever else is in your life. Trust that they have your back. So I like this little saying that I was like, combining these three. Have faith for the ravens in the fall. Do not be afraid of the darkness, because you will make it through. You will make it in and out. Duality, but never losing faith. There is beauty in the darkness as well. There is beauty to be found in the unknown. And so we trust this integration process is happening whether you're constantly tending to it or not. You don't have to constantly practice something for it to be something that stays with you. And yes, practice, of course, practicing and staying consistent is super important. But, sometimes it's just letting something be and letting it settle in rather than trying to force something. And just like we know the leaves will change color every year, we can know we'll make it out of the darkness. We'll make it out of these confusing times where we're trying to integrate what we've learned and we're trying to make changes, or, maybe we just experienced a loss and we're not sure where we're going next. I think there is power in having faith, no matter what you believe in, if you believe in anything at all. How can we have faith in the unknown? And more with this fall card, because sometimes we need to let go of things, but I feel like that's really easier said than done. We can have these rituals where we burn a piece of paper of all the things we're trying to let go, but it's not going to necessarily be like snap of fingers and change right away. But I think setting the intention to think about, what are you releasing? What do you need to release? What is holding you back? Is it worrying too much about something? Is it spending too much time doing things that you don't enjoy, or saying yes to everything when maybe you need to relax sometimes and not say, stay in occasionally, whatever it is? What do you think currently could change in your life, or what is currently changing in your life that is perhaps hard? Maybe you're struggling a little bit with. What might be keeping you from letting go? Change can feel like climbing a mountain. We wonder if it's worth the effort to learn something new. But it's what you learn from the fall. How do you see differently once you get back up? You are on the right path if you're on any path at all. So a couple of secondary cards that I pulled from the Oracle deck that further amplify what I'm trying to say in this episode is Rise. You see that? Zoom, focus. Oh, there we go. Rise. It has a huge, big butterfly. It is some pinks and purples and blues and some yellows and some flowers in there. And it's a reminder that you are rising as you settle in. These things happen at the same time. Like I mentioned with the duality of life. You are rising up just as you are settling, right? It's like you are growing as you are rooting yourself further into the soil. And you're changing. This other card is change, which also has butterflies. And I love that these cards, the change, rise, and the faith cards, all have butterflies. And I think that is really a signifier that you are metamorphosizing every day as we speak. And sometimes, like the caterpillar, sometimes you're in a cocoon. Sometimes you have to be a hermit. Sometimes you have to say no to things that you wanted to say yes to just because you need time inward. Sometimes it's recognizing when you need to call a friend and talk to somebody. And just recognizing that it's all a part of the process. And how does this relate to how we find our own way to be? You know, I think like we've mentioned in previous episodes, you know, it's in our hobbies, it's in staying open to learning and staying a student that we continue to grow, and we can really find enjoyment in life and find connection and community within our interests and what we care about. But, you know, it's a process. It's up and down as we learn these things. Sometimes it changes what we thought we knew, and it can be hard. And I guess I'm just here to say that it's okay to be confused sometimes, or to not really be sure, or to feel like, oh man, like I learned this new hoop trick and now I can't do it, or I feel like I'm forgetting everything I learned from this class I took. And you're not. It's integrating in ways that you don't even know yet. And so it's trusting yourself and what you do know, even if it doesn't always come to mind right away. You're growing and you're blooming and blossoming. And I think, you know, just look for those little signs of growth. Look for those little reminders that you are on the right path and you're doing okay. I think I need those reminders sometimes. A big part of this topic of integration is accepting yourself as you are now, rather than shaming yourself for falling back into old ways, or when it's taking longer than you'd like it to learn a lesson or change a habit. Maybe instead you can honor where you are now. You're not perfect. Nobody is. You already know that it's all a part of the process to get where you're going. But we can forget that sometimes. It feels like we're in the darkness for far too long. It seems like everyone else around you has it all figured out, and you can't seem to understand why you don't. But the truth is, no one has it all figured out. We all struggle with the dualities of life. The fact that there are really good moments in life and there are really hard moments in life, and it's how we navigate those waves of life. And in talking about, you know, what these waves of life bring into our lives and what changes these new winds can bring, I'd like to share a few things that I learned and jotted down during my recent trip to Colorado. So to start, here's a little work in progress poem. And I don't know if I need to say this here, but I guess I should. I own the rights to these words. It's not published yet, but it's, you know, anyway. These moments stay with you. You can take pictures to remember the details of yesterday. Make a collage above the mantle. But there's something about the tingle of pine in my nostrils, and it brings me back. Perhaps not to a specific moment, but a feeling. Sometimes sadness drives discovery too. We wonder why we wander to where we are now, though it may have been merely though it may have merely been a way to escape the sadness. So let yourself be still a moment. Sometimes it's daunting to sit under trees, to wonder what they know and knew. To sit on dried pine needles, twigs, cones, and dirt, between sappy roots and spider webs. But there's an inner knowing that I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. Listen to the babbling brook. Notice how the sun sparkles on the flowing flowered water, flowers and fauna, fairy and fae. May the adventures never end. But you don't have to do it alone. You're not alone. You are loved. Goosebumps, bug bites, and all. There are a few other takeaways that I wrote in my journal while I was at the retreat that I'd like to leave you with. It's little reminders that you can also jot down and take with you into the rest of your day and onward. You know you best. If you must force it, it's not meant to be. Connections will form in ways you cannot expect by staying open. And why not? I'll repeat that if you need me to. You know you best. If you must force it, it's not meant to be. Connections will form in ways you can't even imagine by staying open. I'd like to wrap this up by kind of giving you maybe a little bit of homework, if you'd like. I encourage you to take maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes to sit down and reflect on this episode. Think about, what has come up lately that you've realized doesn't serve you anymore. What are you trying to release? And what is it that keeps you on the right path? I guess, what are the reminders that you can look for that you are doing okay? Just think about that. Think about, for me, sometimes it's literally just seeing a butterfly and I'm like, oh man, it just warms my heart a little bit. And I think it's just taking those moments every day to notice those little things. I think it can make such a huge difference in knowing that everything's okay and everything transitions, everything is continuing to move along. Even if it feels like you're stuck for a while, you're not. You're getting in and out of the darkness. So yeah, whether or not you want to grab a journal, simply sit and think. You can even tape yourself talking or call a friend to ponder this. And we can even bring the discussion onto Discord. So yeah, thank you for tuning into this episode. I hope that there's something in here that resonated with you, whether or not you want to have a discussion about it or not. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen or watch this episode. We got some fun stuff coming. I'm excited to get the Patreon going and to really keep building these connections, because that's what this is all about ultimately. So yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. If you liked what you heard, leave a review or, share it with somebody, whatever. You can also subscribe, follow. We've got a newsletter that comes out every week. If you need that extra reminder, you can sign up by going to our website, 101waysofbeing.com. You can also find us on social media at 101waysofbeing. So we'll see you next time.